I got a phone call at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. It was my neighbor Marge, 72 years old, lives alone since her husband passed. She was whispering into the phone like somebody was standing behind her. "Frank, there is water dripping under my kitchen sink, and I do not know what to do." Just a slow, steady drip at the supply line connection, one drop every couple of seconds. She had a mixing bowl underneath, and it was a quarter full. A plumber would charge $350 to fix that on a weeknight emergency call. But I fixed it in 4 minutes with something I had in my truck. It cost me about 40 cents worth of material. And 3 years later, that joint is still bone dry. In the next 28 minutes, I am going to show you 3 things. First, the specific compound I used and exactly why it works at the molecular level on metal. Second, the exposed history of how the plumbing and sealant industry buried this compound in favor of products designed to fail in 18 to 24 months. And third, the step-by-step method to seal any weeping joint, sweating pipe, or slow drip in your house permanently, including the 5 mistakes that will make the whole thing useless if you get them wrong. Now, let me tell you about the cycle you are probably already trapped in, because almost every homeowner I know has lived through some version of this. You notice a drip. Maybe it is under the bathroom sink. Maybe it is where the water heater connects. Maybe it is a hose bib on the outside of the house that weeps every time you turn it on. So you go to the hardware store. You buy Teflon tape for $1.50. You wrap the threads. The drip stops for a few weeks. Then it comes back. So you go back to the store, and this time you buy pipe joint compound, the gray paste in the little tin. You smear it on, tighten the fitting, and the drip stops again. For maybe 3 months. Then it is back. So now you call a plumber. The plumber comes out, looks at it for about 90 seconds, and tells you the fitting needs to be replaced. That will be $420, including the trip charge. You pay it because what choice do you have? The cabinet is getting warped, and you are worried about mold. The plumber replaces the fitting with the same type of brass connection, wraps it with the same Teflon tape you already tried, tightens it down, and leaves. And 14 months later, you are staring at the same drip in the same spot. Different fitting. Same result. I want you to think about that for a second. You spent $420 to replace a fitting with the same materials that failed the first time. Does that make sense to you? The plumber did not do anything wrong technically. That is the standard repair. But the standard repair is built on a product, Teflon tape, that was never designed to last more than a few years in a plumbing application. It creeps, it compresses, it degrades with thermal cycling. Every time hot water runs through that pipe and the metal expands a fraction of a millimeter, the tape loses a tiny bit of its seal. It is not a defect, it is the nature of PTFE film under compression. The material was originally developed for industrial gasket applications where joints get retorqued on a maintenance schedule. Your kitchen sink does not have a maintenance schedule. And what happens at the molecular level when that tape fails is something the industry does not want you to understand. Because once you do, you will never buy another roll. And that is the part that should bother you. Because there is a compound that does not creep, does not compress permanently, does not degrade with thermal cycling, and actually gets better at sealing as it ages. It has been used on ships, submarines, offshore oil platforms, and military equipment for over 100 years. It costs less than $3, and you have almost certainly never heard of it used for household plumbing, because the industry that sells you Teflon tape, pipe dope, and emergency plumber visits has zero financial incentive to tell you about it. The compound is lanolin, pure anhydrous lanolin. It comes from sheep wool. When sheep grow their fleece, their skin glands produce a waxy substance called wool grease that coats every fiber and makes the animal nearly waterproof in rain. When the wool is sheared and washed, that grease is separated out, refined, and sold as lanolin. You can buy it at any farm supply store, any equestrian shop, and most pharmacies. A 2-ounce jar costs between $2 and $4. That is enough to seal every leaking joint in your entire house and still have some left over. Now here is where the science gets interesting, because lanolin does not work like tape or paste or any sealant you have ever used. Lanolin is what chemists call a eutectic mixture of esters, fatty acids, and alcohols. In plain English, it is a wax that behaves like an oil at skin temperature but solidifies into a tough, flexible membrane when applied to cooler metal surfaces. When you press lanolin into a threaded pipe joint, the molecules are small enough to migrate into the micropores and machining scratches on the metal surface. They physically fill the gaps that water molecules use as pathways to escape the joint. But unlike a rigid sealant that sits on top of the surface, lanolin bonds into the metal itself through a process called adsorption, with a D. The lanolin molecules are attracted to the metal oxide layer on brass, copper, iron, and steel. They form a monomolecular film that is chemically anchored to the surface. This is the critical difference. Teflon tape sits between two surfaces under compression. When the compression changes, the seal changes. Lanolin becomes part of the surface. When the metal expands, the lanolin film expands with it because it is flexible at the molecular level. When the metal contracts, the film contracts. And if a tiny gap forms because of vibration or settling, lanolin is self-healing. The molecules migrate back into the gap through capillary action. The seal repairs itself. No product you can buy at a hardware store does this. Not one. The Navy figured this out before World War I. British naval yards were coating every deck fitting, valve stem, and hull penetration with lanolin grease by 1905. A warship in the North Atlantic takes salt spray, freezing temperatures, tropical heat, and constant vibration from the engines. Every pipe connection on that ship flexes, contracts, and absorbs punishment that would destroy any household sealant in a matter of weeks. Lanolin held. Year after year, deployment after deployment, the coated joints held. By the 1920s, the Royal Navy had standardized lanolin-based compounds across the entire fleet for pipe preservation above and below the waterline. After World War II, the United States Navy adopted the same approach for mothballing warships. When they decommissioned a destroyer or a cruiser, every pipe connection, every valve, every exposed metal surface got a thick coat of lanolin-based preservative. I want you to think about the scale of that. A single Fletcher-class destroyer has over 4 miles of piping, thousands of threaded joints, every one of them coated in lanolin before the ship went into the reserve fleet. Those ships sat in harbors for 10, 15, 20 years. Salt water lapping at the hull, sun baking the deck, freezing winters. When the Navy pulled ships out of storage during Korea and again during Vietnam, they inspected those joints. The lanolin-coated connections were still sealed, still flexible, still waterproof. Fittings that had sat dormant for 2 decades performed like they were installed yesterday. I met a man named Vernon at a swap meet a few years back who told me something about lanolin in industrial settings that will make your jaw drop. I will get to Vernon in a minute, because his story connects to everything I am about to show you. So why have you never heard of this for your kitchen sink? Because in 1953, DuPont began marketing PTFE tape, what we now call Teflon tape, specifically for the plumbing trade. They positioned it as the modern, clean, easy alternative to pipe dope and natural sealants. And it was easier. You just wrap and tighten. Clean hands, no paste to deal with, no animal grease on your fingers. It looked cleaner on the shelf, and it looked cleaner on the joint. Plumbing supply distributors loved it because it was cheap to manufacture, easy to stock, and customers came back to buy more every couple of years. But PTFE tape had one characteristic that made it extremely attractive to the entire plumbing supply chain, from the manufacturer to the distributor to the plumber himself. It degraded predictably. Within 2 to 5 years under normal residential conditions, Teflon tape loses enough of its sealing ability to allow micro leaks. Those micro leaks become service calls. Those service calls generate revenue. By the 1960s, the transition was complete. Plumbing supply catalogs carried Teflon tape, synthetic pipe dope, and compression fittings. Lanolin was nowhere in the catalog. It did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked too well. The American plumbing service industry is worth over $130 billion a year. The sealant and tape market alone is over $2 billion. A product that works once and never needs replacing is the opposite of what that industry needs. So ask yourself, why would they ever tell you about it? I am not saying there was a secret meeting in a boardroom where someone decided to hide lanolin. It is simpler than that. Lanolin was never marketed to homeowners because there was no profit model in a product that lasts 20 years per application. Teflon tape gets purchased 4, 5, 6 times over the same period. Pipe dope dries out in the can and gets thrown away. Compression fittings loosen and need retightening. Every product in the plumbing aisle is designed around a cycle of purchase, failure, and repurchase. Lanolin breaks that cycle, so lanolin stayed in the military and maritime world, where the priority is reliability, not recurring revenue. Here is how to use it. And I want you to follow these steps exactly, because the preparation matters as much as the lanolin itself. Step 1. Turn off the water supply to the fitting you are going to seal. If it is a sink, there is a shut-off valve underneath. If it is a water heater, there is a valve on the cold water inlet. If you do not have individual shutoffs, turn off the main. Do not try to apply lanolin to an actively dripping joint. It will not bond properly to wet metal. Step 2. Dry the joint completely. I use a hairdryer on the warm setting for about 2 minutes. You want the metal surface warm and bone dry. Not hot enough to burn your hand, just warm. About 100 to 110 degrees. The warmth does 2 things. It opens the micro pores in the metal slightly, and it softens the lanolin so it flows into those pores more easily. Step 3. Take a pea-sized amount of lanolin, about the size of a marble if you are working a larger fitting, and warm it between your fingers for about 30 seconds. It will soften from a waxy paste into something that feels like thick lip balm. Frank made a mistake the first time he tried this, by the way. I used cold lanolin straight from the jar on a cold pipe in my basement in January. The basement was maybe 45 degrees. The pipe was even colder. I smeared a big glob of it on the fitting and it just sat on the surface like a lump of candle wax. Did not penetrate. Did not flow into the threads. Did not seal. The joint dripped again the next day and I thought the whole method was useless. Threw the jar in a drawer and forgot about it for 2 months. Then I read an old Navy technical manual from 1954 that specified warming the compound before application. Tried it again in March with a warmer pipe and warmed lanolin. Sealed on the first try. It was not useless. I was just being impatient. The temperature matters. Step 4. Press the warmed lanolin into the joint where the threads meet. Work it into the gap between the male and female threads with your fingertip. You are not smearing it on top like paint. You are pushing it into the thread valleys. Go all the way around the joint. If there is excess on the surface, that is fine, but make sure the thread area is saturated. Step 5. Now take a clean rag or paper towel and wipe off the excess from the outer surface. You want lanolin in the threads, not sitting on the outside where it will collect dust. A thin, residual film on the outside is fine and actually helps prevent corrosion on brass and copper. Step 6. Turn the water back on slowly, not full blast. Open the valve a quarter turn and wait 60 seconds. Look at the joint. If you see any moisture forming, the lanolin has not fully penetrated yet. Turn the water off, dry it again, and apply a second coat, working it in deeper. In my experience, about 1 joint in 10 needs a second application. The other 9 seal on the first try. That is it. 6 steps, 4 minutes of work, 40 cents of material, and that joint is sealed for the next 15 to 20 years, likely longer. If you are finding this useful, do something for me. Tap that subscribe button right now. I have another video coming next week that the chemical cleaning industry absolutely does not want you to see, and you are going to want to be here for that one. Now let me tell you what happened with my neighbor Marge, because her story did not end that night under the kitchen sink. About 2 months after I sealed her supply line fitting, she called me again. This time it was the outdoor hose bib on the back of her house. The handle connection had been weeping for what she estimated was 2 full summers. She had a plumber come look at it the previous year, and he quoted her $650 to replace the entire hose bib assembly, which meant cutting into the exterior wall. She could not afford it on her pension. I drove over with the same jar of lanolin, dried the fitting with a rag, and let the afternoon sun warm the brass for about 10 minutes. Applied the lanolin into the stem packing area and around the bonnet threads. Took maybe 5 minutes total. That was 2.5 years ago. She called me last month, not because it was leaking, but because she wanted to tell me she had just tested it and it was still completely dry. She said she felt stupid for almost paying $650 for something that cost her nothing. I told her she was not stupid. She was lied to. There is a difference. Now let me tell you about Vernon, the man I mentioned earlier. The retired boiler operator I met at a hardware swap meet about 5 years ago. Vernon spent 31 years maintaining industrial boiler systems at a paper mill in Wisconsin. The pipe joints on those systems run at 200 degrees Fahrenheit under constant pressure. Vernon told me that when he started in 1973, the old-timers in the plant used straight lanolin on every threaded connection in the low-pressure steam return lines. Not Teflon, not pipe dope. Lanolin. He said some of those joints had not been touched since the 60s, and they were still sealed. Then in the early 80s, the plant switched to a new synthetic thread sealant because the vendor offered volume pricing and the purchasing department wanted to standardize supplies. Within 3 years, the leak rate on threaded connections quadrupled. Vernon said management blamed it on the aging pipes. It was not the pipes, it was the sealant. He went back to lanolin on his own section of the plant, and his leak rate dropped back to near zero. Nobody in management ever asked him why his section performed better. They did not want to know. Now, I need to be honest with you about the limits of this method, because I will never tell you something works when it does not. Lanolin seals weeping joints, slow drips at threaded connections, condensation leaks, and minor seepage at compression fittings. It is outstanding for those applications, but it is not a structural repair. If you have a pipe with a crack, a pinhole from corrosion, or a fitting that is physically broken, lanolin will not save you. That pipe needs to be replaced. If you have a joint under high pressure, like the main supply line where it enters your house at 60 to 80 psi, and that joint is actively spraying water, do not try to lanolin your way out of it. Shut the water off and call a plumber. Lanolin is for the slow, persistent, low-pressure leaks that drive you crazy and cost you money over years. The drip under the sink, the weeping hose bib, the condensation drip on the water heater fitting, the slow seep at the washing machine valve. That is where lanolin is unbeatable. And that is exactly the category of leak that generates the most repeat service calls for the plumbing industry. Here are 5 mistakes that will ruin the seal, and the last one is the most important. Mistake number 1. Using lanolin on PVC or plastic fittings. Lanolin bonds to metal through adsorption to the oxide layer. Plastic does not have a metal oxide layer. The lanolin will sit on the surface and do nothing. For plastic threaded connections, Teflon tape is actually the right choice because the compression seal works fine on non-expanding material. This is a metal technique for metal fittings. Mistake number 2. Applying it to a wet surface. I said this already, but I am saying it again because it is the #1 reason this method fails for people who try it. Water molecules are smaller than lanolin molecules. If the micropores are already filled with water, the lanolin cannot get in. Dry the joint, warm the joint, then apply. That sequence is not optional. Mistake number 3. Using lanolin lotion instead of anhydrous lanolin. The pharmacy sells lanolin lotion for skincare. That product is 60 to 70% water with emulsifiers and fragrances. It will do absolutely nothing for a pipe joint. You need anhydrous lanolin, which means 0 water content. The label should say pure lanolin, anhydrous lanolin, or wool wax. If it says lotion, cream, or moisturizer, put it back. Mistake number 4. Over-tightening the fitting after applying lanolin. Lanolin makes metal surfaces slippery. If you grab a wrench and crank the fitting an extra half turn because it feels loose, you can crack brass fittings or strip threads. Have you ever cracked a brass fitting by over-tightening? It is not a fun sound. The lanolin is doing the sealing, not the compression. Hand tight plus a quarter turn with a wrench is all you need. If you are white-knuckling it with a pipe wrench, you have gone too far. Mistake number 5, and this is the one people miss because it is not about technique. Do not confuse a weeping joint with a failing pipe. A joint leak happens at the connection point between two pieces. A pipe leak happens in the body of the pipe itself. If you see water coming from the middle of a straight section of pipe, not from a fitting, that pipe has internal corrosion or a manufacturing defect. No sealant of any kind will fix that permanently. You need a pipe replacement. The reason this matters is that people get excited about lanolin, and rightfully so, and they start trying to use it on problems it was never meant to solve. Know the difference between a joint problem and a pipe problem. A joint problem is what lanolin fixes. A pipe problem is what a plumber fixes. There is no shame in calling a professional when the situation actually requires one. The shame is calling one when it does not, and paying $400 for something you could have done yourself in 4 minutes. So let me give you the real numbers. The average American homeowner deals with 2 to 3 minor plumbing leaks per decade. Each one generates a service call averaging $350 to $500 if you call a plumber. That is $700 to $1,500 per decade. Over 30 years of homeownership, you are looking at $2,100 to $4,500 in plumber visits for leaks that a $3 jar of lanolin could have fixed permanently. And those are just the direct costs. Water damage to cabinets, subflooring, and drywall from slow leaks that go unnoticed adds another $500 to $2,000 per incident in repair costs. The Insurance Information Institute says water damage from household leaks is the second most common homeowner insurance claim in the country, behind only wind and hail damage. The average claim payout is over $12,000. And the majority of those claims start with a slow, persistent drip at a threaded connection. The exact type of leak that lanolin seals permanently. The jar of lanolin I bought 4 years ago still has product in it. I have sealed 11 joints in my own house, Marge's house, and 2 other neighbors' homes. Total material cost for all 11 repairs combined was under $3. 11 joints, 4 years, 0 callbacks, 0 repeat drips, 0 plumber invoices. Every time I open that jar, I think about how many homeowners are going to spend $400 this week on a problem that costs 40 cents to fix. And that is not a tragedy of knowledge. It is a tragedy of marketing. The solution has been sitting in farm supply stores since before any of us were born. The sheep figured out waterproofing millions of years ago. We just had to stop letting the sealant industry tell us to forget it. The jar is still in my truck. The plumber was never called. The joints are still dry. If you want to see what the chemical cleaning industry has been hiding from you since 1961, that video is on your screen right now. Subscribe if you are not already, and I will see you over there.